And on to the details now. Ousted Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro appeared in the New York court for the first time and pleaded not guilty to all charges against him after U.S. captured them in a military operation. Maduro, who called himself the president of Venezuela, said he is innocent and not guilty, while Maduro's wife, Cilia Flores, also pleaded not guilty. Maduro has long denied the allegations, saying they were a mask for imperialistic designs on Venezuela's rich oil reserves. Maduro lawyer Barry Pollack said he anticipated voluminous and complex litigation over what he called his client's military abduction. He also said Maduro was not requesting his release but may later. Maduro is facing charges of narco-terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation, conspiracy and weapon charges. The judge ordered both to remain behind bars and set a new hearing date of March 17th. While Venezuela's Vice President and Oil Minister Delcy Rodriguez was formally sworn in on Monday as the country's interim president, 2 days after U.S. forces captured her predecessor, Nicolás Maduro, and his wife Cilia Flores to face trial in New York. Rodriguez took the oath in the National Assembly, telling lawmakers she did so in the name of all Venezuelans. Rodriguez, a 56-year-old labor lawyer, was sworn in by her brother George, who is the head of the National Assembly legislature. Also sworn in on Monday were 283 lawmakers elected last May, just a small number and classed as opposition. Most of the opposition boycotted the contest. The only lawmaker not in attendance was First Lady Cilia Flores, who is in U.S. custody. The ambassadors of China, Russia and Iran, all close allies of Venezuela, were among the first foreign diplomats to congratulate Delcy Rodriguez after she was sworn in as the country's acting president. And UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Monday called for respect of nations' political independence following a U.S. military operation in Venezuela. Now, Guterres said in a statement delivered to the Council by UN Political Affairs Chief Rosemary DiCarlo that he was concerned that the U.S. operation to capture Maduro in Caracas early on Saturday did not respect the rules of international law.
The latest developments follow a period of heightened tensions beginning in mid-August, as discussed in this Council on the 2 previous occasions. I have consistently stressed the imperative of full respect by all for international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, which provides the foundation for the maintenance of international peace and security. I remain deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the 3 January military action. The Charter enshrines the prohibition of the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state.
Well, the United States rejected accusations of aggression against Venezuela at an emergency United Nations Security Council meeting, saying the operation was a law enforcement action tied to long-standing criminal charges.
As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco-trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years. The United States will not waver in our actions to protect Americans from the scourge of narco-terrorism and seeks peace, liberty and justice for the great people of Venezuela.
While Venezuela's UN ambassador Samuel Moncada said international norms were at risk in the aftermath of the U.S. arrest and also urged the Security Council to demand that Washington releases Maduro and his wife.
Venezuela is a victim of these attacks as a result of its natural wealth. Oil, energy, strategic resources, and the geopolitical position of our country have historically been factor of greed and external pressure. When the use of force is used to control resources, impose governments, or redesign states, we are faced with a logic that refers to the worst practice of colonialism and neocolonialism. Accepting this logic implies opening the door to a profoundly unstable world where countries with greater military capabilities can decide by force the political and economic destiny of other states.
Han sido históricamente factores de codicia.
And for more on this, we have my colleague Akshay Tongre joining us. Well, Akshay, how strong is the U.S. claim that this was a law enforcement action rather than an act of aggression? And what legal precedent could this case set for cross-border arrest of sitting or former heads of state?
Well, there is no legality, honestly, to the claims that the US is making. You can't just pick somebody on the basis of allegations. It's not even that the court had already ruled out that Nicolás Maduro is a narco-terrorist, or even then, you can't really pick up a foreign leader based on your domestic judgment. It can be anything. It can be that the judges were paid off. They were giving a partisan sort of a judgment, and it's like a Delhi local court giving an order that Donald Trump is in Epstein files and he has to be arrested. So it doesn't mean that our forces can go to the US and pick Donald Trump up. So if this thing follows, if you're talking about legal precedents, if this kind of incidents start to follow, then no world leader is going to be safe in their territory, because any court in any country can rule out against a foreign leader, and countries can start sending their militaries to abduct these leaders based on their own domestic judgment. So it's very dangerous for the global order. It's very dangerous for the United Nations, which had very little credibility left as it is. We have seen during Israel-Hamas conflict, we have seen during Russia-Ukraine conflict that it has absolutely shattered in front of any sort of pressure to mediate in any conflict. And again, we are seeing that other major countries, dropping in themselves, like it used to happen before the United Nations, and nobody respecting really the order that is there, especially the United Nations Security Council that is long pending for changes, for restructuring, that follows the same old method that has been set up after the World War II, which has 5 permanent members. And if these 5 permanent members want, no resolution can be adopted. In fact, the resolution, if it is brought in the United Nations Security Council, it will straight be vetoed by the US, which means that it will be blocked at the very site, which means that it is useless if these 5 nations are involved, which includes Russia, China, France, UK, and US, and doesn't really represent most of the world, including the largest democracy, that is India, countries like Japan, Germany. So it is rendered useless, to be honest. So as of now, there is not much hope from the United Nations either.
Absolutely, UNSC definitely needs a restructuring. But Akshay, Maduro is now standing in the New York courtroom pleading not guilty. While back home, Delcy Rodriguez has been sworn in by the legislator. Most of the opposition refused to recognize. Now, how credible and stable does this interim government really look right now?
Well, it's not quite stable because already Venezuela has been going through a political crisis. The opposition obviously is lured by the US to bring them into power, and obviously it seems that they have already picked up, the chance to be in power, the chance to sell oil to US over their own national sovereignty and integrity, which has been diminished by the action that has been taken by the US. We can see that Venezuela is obviously a much smaller country, much smaller economy, but every country has its own self-respect on the international forums, its own rule-based order, and what US has done is attack on that pride of Venezuela as a nation. By going and picking up Maduro, they could have sent their legal teams. They could have done something about it. But the manner in which it has been executed, the abduction of Maduro, is obviously it has shaken the political landscape of the country as well.
All right. Also, Akshay, given the backing of allies like Russia, China and Iran and the UN Secretary General's concerns also, how might this arrest reshape US-Latin America relations, if we talk about, and overall influence the global norms around sovereignty and intervention?
Well, United Nations Security Council or the UN in general will obviously give statements, and at least they have spoken on the issue that the sovereignty of Venezuela has been targeted by US attack. However, it doesn't. That's it for the US to do, because earlier as well in other conflicts they can only give statements, and there is hardly anything they can do. But if you look at countries like China, Iran again is already embroiled in a sort of a proxy war there in the Middle East. Then there is China. China's own credibility has been questioned. All the PR campaigning that China has done for the last 2 decades, that it is a superpower, it is a rising superpower, it is a hegemon in the region, because at the sight of their own ally being abducted, there was hardly anything China could do in terms of hard actions. But we have to wait and watch that how these things turn out in future, and whether there will be some shift according to the geopolitical interest of these major players.
All right, Akshay, thank you so much for all those details.